everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com and it's time for some Monday news. How lovely. Monday. Gotta get up on Monday because it's Monday and you gotta get up and face the week, haven't you? And I hate it. But don't worry, because I do have some wrestling news for you. So without any further ado, without any more waffling by me, let's take a look at some lovely headlines. First of all, a babyface turn for a WWE Superstar is set for after WrestleMania. Next up, ahead of tonight's Monday Night Raw, a WWE title has shockingly changed hands. And finally, you may have heard this one already, but it was too big not to mention, WrestleMania 36 is being filmed this week. So, as you may have already seen on last week's Friday Night SmackDown, Bayley's opponent, or should I say opponents, for WrestleMania 36 were decided. Yes, we have confirmation of the SmackDown Women's Championship match. That's right, Bayley will be defending the belt against not just one, not just two, but 5 other competitors as she takes part in a 6-pack challenge for the belt, taking on, right, let's see if I can get this in one go, Lacey Evans, Dana Brooke, Naomi, Tamina, and also Bayley's best friend herself, Sasha Banks. But according to Dave Meltzer, these were not the original plans, and according to him as well, these have been changed because there hasn't been enough time to properly build the match they were going to have in time for WrestleMania. All of this means that we're apparently set to see a babyface turn for somebody after WrestleMania. I'll explain exactly what I mean. Right, okay, so apparently the first plan was to have Bayley take on Sasha Banks herself at WrestleMania, and that would mean that we get a rematch, of course, of their awesome feud back down in NXT, which was just incredible and I think did a lot for women's wrestling at the time. And it should be looked back upon, I think, as a real key turning point in the whole women's revolution. And apparently the original plan was to do that match again at WrestleMania, but because there hasn't been enough time to build towards that match, it looks like we're getting a whole host of other competitors as well. Once again, they are Naomi, Tamina, Dana Brooke, and Lacey Evans. I've done it again. He's done it. I'm on form today, guys. Don't worry about it. So where does the babyface turn come in? Well, according to Meltzer, he reckons that it's going to lead to that feud with Sasha and Bayley, but that'll just happen after WrestleMania. They've delayed that feud very slightly, and that match will happen not at WrestleMania itself, but at a later date. You could say that is a wise decision by WWE, but it means that they're going to have to tweak a few alignments, or one in particular, I guess, to get that desired result. Meltzer reckons that we are set to see a babyface turn for either Bayley or Sasha Banks in order to get that match. Now, he doesn't know which one. I would theorize that if this is true, then I reckon the one who's going to turn babyface is probably going to be Sasha Banks, because Bayley has turned heel more recently. I think that the crowd would be more behind, well, I think that the fans watching at home would be more behind Sasha if she were to turn face. And yeah, I feel like Sasha hasn't really had her WrestleMania moment yet. She's always seemed to come up short. And I feel like if she were to win at WrestleMania and Bayley were to take that very, very badly, that could lead to a lovely rematch down the line. Likewise, if Bayley were to screw Sasha at WrestleMania, that could again lead to that match further down the line, and Sasha would still be a brilliant babyface. That's not to say I don't think they could turn Bayley babyface as well, excuse me. However, I think that Sasha is the more natural one at this stage, which sounds bizarre to say that Bayley isn't the most natural babyface in the situation, but I think specifically here, it would be Sasha Banks. Next up, I don't know if you've seen this, but I have some urgent and shocking news because a WWE title has changed hands heading into tonight's Monday Night Raw. Now, I must confess that when I first saw this story, I thought it was that the WWE title had changed hands heading up to Monday Night Raw, but then just as I was going through Twitter this morning, I saw the title change in question. Unfortunately, for big Brock Lesnar fans out there, he is still the WWE champion, but a WWE title has changed hands, and it's none other than the bloody 24/7 championship. Guys, get so hype right now. Yeah, honestly, I thought Riddick Moss was going to be holding on to that title for a long time just because of the current conditions that we live in. I thought that he was going to just take it to his house and sit there, self-isolate, and just become the longest, well, he was already the longest reigning single reign 24/7 champion, but I thought he was going to hold it for just days and days and days, eclipse what R-Truth had done, but it turns out R-Truth didn't like the sound of that and found a way to win that belt back. So as WWE made clear on Twitter, Riddick Moss was going for a lovely jog around his neighborhood neighborhood, which looked lovely, by the way. And then a sports car pulled up with a referee inside, and Riddick Moss immediately got suspicious. He was saying, "Referee, you can't afford to live in my neighborhood," which is offensive to all referees, I think, and you should be ashamed of yourself, Riddick Moss. Also, I think he may have been suspicious about the car, or maybe I was just suspicious about the car. It wasn't a very discreet car, if you watch the video. The referee gets out of the car. Riddick Moss is like, "What's going on? I know that he's somewhere. There's someone somewhere." R-Truth gets out the trunk, as Americans would say, or the boot, as us here in the UK would say, and goes around the side, rolls up Riddick Moss, and R-Truth is the new 24/7 champion. Could they not give the belt to someone else? That's not to say I'm not a fan of R-Truth. I do like him. It's just that here's another thing I noticed when I first read that title. I thought that I didn't think it was it says at Ron Killings, because that's the Twitter handle he uses. I thought it said Ron Simmons. So I was expecting Farouk to just come out of nowhere and just decimate Riddick Moss and win the belt and shout damn, presumably as well. But no, it wasn't Ron Simmons. It was Ron Killings, R-Truth. So it just made me hope that they find more creative ways to do this, hopefully while still adhering to all the health and safety measures that are going on around the world. And I just think that spread your wings a bit, WWE. Give that belt to different people across all parts of the roster, not just literally just R-Truth. But on a serious note though, because the 24/7 division is largely treated as just fun and games by WWE 95% of the time, but what does this title change mean for Ricochet? What does it mean for Cedric Alexander? Two superstars with limitless potential, who Riddick Moss easily, handily, shockingly defeated on Raws in weeks gone by. Why did you feed them to Riddick Moss, only to have Riddick Moss lose to R-Truth in typical 24/7 division fashion? I wish I had the answers, but I don't. Next up, let's talk about Matt Hardy, who of course recently made his AEW debut. Not his in-ring debut, just appearing in the arena. And it looks like he's a babyface. He's going to be on the side of the Elite when they take on the Inner Circle. But Matt Hardy revealed over the weekend via social media that he is not just interested in wrestling for AEW, and there's a certain other place that he might want to go. He said on Twitter, "Social media is the ultimate melting pot of opinions. My recent feedback has been monumental. For everybody that has bombarded me with adoration, joy and support, thank you. If you're not happy with my career decision and have let me know about it, thank you as well. I'm flattered you care," which is a very balanced way to look at it from Matt Hardy. And then in the replies, somebody asked him about working in Japan, I should say, and he said, "My contract would allow that. Truth be told, I'd love the opportunity to perform on a New Japan Pro Wrestling Wrestle Kingdom show in some capacity." Now obviously Matt Hardy would not be the first AEW star to do such a thing. We've seen Jon Moxley do it, we've seen Chris Jericho. I wonder how he'd fit in, I suppose. I would like to see it, because I think the Wrestle Kingdom should become a little bit more at least, of a variety show, because in recent years it's been known as this super work rate card with just dream matches going on all over the place, and that's great, that is wonderful, and it leads to some brilliant wrestling, but excellent match after excellent match after excellent match. By the end of the night you're totally exhausted. And also this year New Japan did 2 nights back to back, and by the end me and Sam were just like, ugh. There was too much good wrestling overload, and I'd enjoy some more comedic, some more character-based stuff sprinkled in by the likes of Matt Hardy throughout the night. Not necessarily in big showcase feature matches. His match could be kept relatively short if that was best for everybody involved. But I do think it would be a good idea just to cleanse the palate in between 5-star match after 5-star match. But then again, I may be looking at that from a very ignorant Western wrestling fan point of view, because in New Japan at least, that's typically how things work. The show builds to an absolute crescendo with all of the big barn burners going on towards the end of the night. So I may have looked at that in a very reductive way. I don't know. If Matt Hardy were to go over to Wrestle Kingdom, I would be very interested to see just how New Japan utilized him. Speaking of New Japan, a New Japan legend took to Twitter to start a bit of a flame war against Daniel Bryan and Drew Gulak, and it's none other than Blue Justice himself. What a lovely man, Yuji Nagata. Now, it's not as serious as it may first sound, because basically what happened was Nagata quote retweeted a gif of Daniel Bryan and Drew Gulak doing that Nagata warm-up where I can't do it, I'm doing it absolutely no justice at all, but they're warming up before their tag match and they're bumping shoulders back and forth. You know the thing? Well, Nagata did that, right, back in his tag team days, so I guess that's the link there in the story if you were looking for one, right? Don't know why I got so annoyed there, sorry, that was probably due to insecurity because of my lack of shoulder bumping expertise. And Nagata was dishing out the insecurity as well, dishing it out to other people, I should say, because he said, sorry, this is not good, laughing emoji, Bryan and Gulak have been absolutely humiliated by a man they were trying to pay tribute to in the ring on SmackDown. But Bryan took it all in good faith, saying, sorry Nagata-san, we will try to get better. And then guess who jumped in just to stick the knife in a little bit more? None other than Shorty G, Chad Gable. Now, in fairness, if anybody has a right to jump in and criticise this sort of warm-up, it's probably Shorty G, because he is an Olympic-level wrestler, amateur wrestler, lest we forget. And it's easy to forget, because WWE have dressed him in oversized basketball gear and are calling him Shorty G. But Gable jumped in and said, I could drive a truck through the gap in those elbows, and where is the lat control? Ooh, Shorty G's better at doing that warm-up than you are, lads, and Nagata is as well. Now, I'm assuming this is Shorty G attempting to... He's seen what Bryan's done for Drew Gulak, and he's like, I want a bit of that. Daniel Bryan can be my ticket out of this part of the card that I really don't want to be in. He could be my ticket towards the main event scene. So maybe he's trying to start a feud with Daniel Bryan on social media, and hopefully Bryan will go, right, I'll take him along with me, get in my stable of lads with Drew Gulak. Or... maybe, and I think this would be entertaining as well, maybe Shorty G is looking for a desperate way out. He's seen that Nagata's got involved and he's trying to kickstart something with Nagata so he can get over to New Japan and just get out of there. That is rampant speculation on my behalf, but in saying it, I've actually come across a scenario that I'd really love to see, and that would be Shorty G, Chad Gable, let's call him that, getting involved with Bryan and Gulak. They would make such a great little trio. That's the sort of Shield I want to see. If you agree, drop a comment in the comments down below. I'm so frustrated with what's happening to Gable. I can't find the words. Next up, now I suspect you may have heard this news story already just because it was such a big story over the weekend, but in case you've just closed off all wrestling news over the weekend, we had to report on it this Monday morning, and that is that WrestleMania 36 is being taped this week. Now, this hasn't been confirmed by WWE themselves, but it's been reported in widespread fashion across the internet. So Mike Johnson of PW Insider reported it. It was confirmed by Dave Meltzer of the Wrestling Observer. It was confirmed by Post Wrestling. It seems as though this is the case, that WrestleMania, as unthinkable as it sounds, that WrestleMania 36 is being taped this week, even though we've still got about 2 weeks to go until the show itself. And in case you're really behind on your wrestling news, and this video is going to be such a shock to you if you are, WrestleMania is of course taking place over 2 dates this year, Saturday the 4th of April, I believe, and Sunday the 5th. And apparently, according to some of the reports about WrestleMania being taped this week, it seems as though there's going to be other things involved in the broadcast when it comes out eventually in weeks' time that aren't live, that aren't from the Performance Center, but are from other locations instead. But it hasn't been made clear what they are or when these little segments are set to be taped. In saying little segments, I could have reported that inaccurately there, to be fair. It could be whole chunks of the show filmed elsewhere. We just don't know, because nothing like this has ever happened before. So let's take a look at WWE's taping schedule, as unreal as that sounds for a company like WWE. But let's look at this week's taping schedule. First reported by John Pollock of Post Wrestling, and since confirmed by Mike Johnson of PW Insider. So it seems like the next 2 SmackDowns were filmed on last Saturday, and NXT was filmed on Sunday. It doesn't say which NXT, it just says NXT content. Hopefully they've managed to get an actual show together this week, because as well put together as last week's NXT was, it was just, you know, a show of video packages and recaps and interviews, and there was no wrestling on it, and you'd like to see wrestling on NXT. It's what they're best for. Now tonight, on Monday night, apparently the next 2 Raws will be filmed, and then WrestleMania will be filmed in the 2 days following that. So Tuesday and Wednesday this week, while we're all tucked up in our beds or just watching some TV, across the other side of the world, for us in the UK at least, WrestleMania is being taped. It's so unreal to think, after it's been a live event for decades, it's so strange to think that it's being taped ahead of time. And it's going to be weird watching the matches as well, isn't it? Because how taped are they going to be? How edited are they going to be? Usually when WWE have taped shows in advance, like just before SmackDown went back to live, for example, when it was just SmackDown, they didn't really trim the matches down too much, did they? They'd often edit out a big mistake or something, but they'd usually leave the matches as is. But are they going to be satisfied with that when it comes to WrestleMania? Or are they going to try and make these tapings as perfect as physically possible? Is it going to be more like creating a big album or something for WWE with hours spent in production, tweaking everything and getting everything right? It's totally bizarre, and I don't really know what to make of it, but hopefully when we do see the show, some semblance of just the original match form is there in place, at least I hope anyway. But some of you might want it to be just totally over the top, totally edited, a million camera angles, swooping drone shots over the ring, and that. Actually, now that I'm talking about it, I kind of want that as well. And finally, a big match has been announced for this week's Dynamite, and it's none other than Cody Rhodes taking on Jimmy Havoc. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with Jimmy Havoc, this may be a slightly underwhelming match just because you don't know too much about Jimmy Havoc. There hasn't been much of a spotlight on him in AEW since he started, but particularly in recent months. But for UK wrestling fans, this should be pretty damn exciting. And that's because, like the likes of Will Ospreay, Zack Sabre Jr. and Marty Scurll, Jimmy Havoc is a true standout of this recent golden era of British wrestling that we're just coming out the back of now. And in a different way. The great thing about British wrestling around that time was that everyone brought something different to the table. So with Ospreay, you had elite level high flying. Scurll, you had this whole iconic villain character, and then he joined the Bullet Club and everything like that. With Zack Sabre Jr., you had such immense technical skill. With Jimmy Havoc, now everyone looks at him and thinks, right, deathmatch, hardcore, stupid stuff like that. It's stupid stuff if you're not into it, by the way. But with Jimmy Havoc, really what you get is storytelling. And so I'm really excited to see what happens on Dynamite, because yes, I mean, you'd expect Cody to get the win here, obviously. He often does this, where he'll take on a guy who hasn't had much of a spotlight put on him, and he'll take them to a competitive match, but Cody then will prevail in the end. But I do think, even though I do also think that Cody will win this match, I think that he's really, really good at helping put certain aspects of the other guy's character and the other guy's wrestling style over in these matches. So maybe, you know what, maybe Jimmy Havoc will get some weapons involved. Maybe there'll be blood. I don't know if there should be. But maybe Jimmy Havoc will use this as a springboard to get to his next big storyline beat, I guess, in his AEW journey. And that's something that I really do hope happens, because I would really like to see that. And I feel like Havoc is such an underappreciated talent when it comes to people who aren't too familiar with his work, and I think that what he's done for British wrestling is immense, and hopefully it can continue in some form in AEW. Havoc hyped the match on Twitter, saying, "On Wednesday, I'm going to make Cody Rhodes suffer." Oh, exciting times. Some other matches have been announced because, of course, the Blood and Guts match has been postponed. If Tom's news video's already gone out, he's talked about it on there. If it hasn't, he's gonna talk about it on there. Spoilers, sorry for that. But also, here are some other matches announced for the night. So, Luchasaurus versus Wardlow in a lumberjack match. A bit of a controversial one, of course, with people meant to be social distancing. A lot of people online were saying maybe it's not a good idea to have so many people crowded around the ringside area. Maybe they'll find a way to address that. It remains to be seen. Chuck Taylor and Trent, the Best Friends, taking on Pentagon and Phoenix in that parking lot street fight brawl that they wanted to challenge them to at the end of their match on last week's show. And also Matt Hardy and Chris Jericho, not a match, but to have a one-on-one confrontation, which should be hilarious and compelling in equal measure. So that's it for my news video today. Thank you very much for watching. Now, the other day, I did say that I wanted everybody to watch a match and then come along and talk about it in the comments. And I'll do that for every news video, and then we've got something to do while a lot of us are really bored at home. So, last time I said watch Steve Blackman versus Shane McMahon from SummerSlam 2000. This time I'll say go and watch Cedric Alexander versus Kota Ibushi from the Cruiserweight Classic. And then write down there what on earth you thought of that madness that just occurred, everyone. See you very soon.